Welcome to episode number 265 of the Marine Layer podcast. We welcome on our friend and recurring guest, Aram Leighton from Just Baseball. We talk about the Mariners' options at pick number 3 in this upcoming MLB draft. We also ask him about the character of this draft, what are some of the defining characteristics of it, and much, much more. We also have our number 2 MLB Draft Spotlight.
If you guys are listening, make sure you're staying on top of all of our stuff. Make sure to go over to our website, marinelayerpod.com. You can find all of our merch. We'd love to see you wearing the hats, the hoodies, the t-shirts. It is more summer season, so if you're into the t-shirts and hats, we totally get it. But if you want to get anything else that's over there, same idea applies. Again, love seeing it around the park. We'd love to continue to see it. So go get your merch. You can sign up for our Patreon over there. You can check out our live show schedule over there. You can also make sure to download and rate and review these episodes if you're listening to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, drop a comment. That really helps if you do, if you're watching over on YouTube. And then find us all across social media at Marine Layer Pod.
Let's get it rolling.
The pitch from Acevedo. A drive deep to right field. Down the line. The Mariners win this game 2-1. The dream lives. They're going to the playoffs. 1-1 from Jansen. There you go. Left field. We got a tie ball game. Julio. Oh, baby, what a moment. Tie ball game at 7-7.
And we welcome you to this episode of the Marine Layer podcast, part of the Just Baseball podcast network. Recording on Monday afternoon, July 7th. There was one storyline we need to tie up that we didn't get in Monday's episode before we spend the rest of today's episode talking about the upcoming Major League Baseball draft with our friend Aram Leighton. But Lyle, how about Dom Canzone since he's been called up? Let me read you these stats of Dom Canzone since he was called back on June 9th. I think we're not talking enough about how good Dom Canzone has been in his return to the Mariners and how he could potentially be a different bat and a little bit more developed than he was in his first couple stints as the Mariners. He's got a slash line of 306, 333, 597. He's got 6 home runs. He's got an OPS over 900. Is it that much different?
This looks more like the guy that we were told he could be when they traded for him, when they said he could be a 25 home run guy a year. He could really tap into the power. He could mash right-handers. That's what we're seeing right now. Now, it's pretty crazy to see, considering the guy was starting the year in the minor leagues, was just mashing with Tacoma, felt like he was almost stuck down in AAA, 27 years old, and you look and you say, what's the role going to be for Dom? Is this just what he's going to be long-term? Is he just going to be a depth outfielder for the organization? All of a sudden, he's gotten another chance here, and he's run with it. It's at the point now where you can't take the guy out when there's a right-hander on the mound. Dom Canzone's OPSing almost 900 for the season. He's crushing it. Now, it's a small sample, but again, in the sample we've seen so far, he's crushing it.
And he's deserved to stay in this lineup. And you and I have talked about a couple times how they approach the deadline if they look at Dom Canzone and they believe what he's doing is sustainable and they think it's going to be a valuable piece of this offense in August and September. I think it'll come down a little bit because there are still some of the things that Dom Canzone does that are pretty similar to what he was struggling with before. First off, still chases a lot, swings at a lot of pitches out of the strike zone. It's harder to sustain success if you're doing that. His walk rate right now is below 4%. That's also not very sustainable if you're not going to walk. But if he keeps his strikeout rate at a manageable spot, okay, like there will be some good stuff here. What's going to happen when pitchers, again, readjust and throw him some more pitches out of the strike zone? How much success is he going to have? How much chase is he going to have? That's something the Mariners are going to have to sort of evaluate. But I will say, it's been nice to see this from Dom. 2 years after they traded for him and wanted to see this profile from him, he's showing them at least a little bit of it. And what do you know? He's got like arguably the best raw power on the team. You wouldn't think so, but he does.
Yeah, he can absolutely just hit a tank of a baseball. I don't know if I put it over Julio's raw power when Julio's at his best, but it's up there. When Dom Canzone gets into a baseball, it goes a long way. Dom does not hit cheap shot home runs. What was it when he hit the home run last weekend against the Rangers, so about a week and a half ago? There was that stat they put up on the screen on TV where they said Dom doesn't have a home run this year that's less than 394 feet. He just crushes baseballs.
Well, it's also the fact the home run he hit in Arizona was the hardest hit Mariners home run still this year. And that includes beating what Cal Raleigh did against the Pirates on the 4th. I think Dom's was, 115.9, and Cal's was 115.2.
Crazy. Is there a world the Mariners would think about trading Canzone at the deadline if they feel like his value is going to be the highest it ever will be?
I wouldn't say it's the craziest thing. You would think they're getting a bat back, though, right?
I'm sure it would be in a package for somebody.
You're not trading Dom and not planning to replace that production. Trade Dom and get Luis Robert? Would people be happy about that?
Honestly, no. At this point, if you're asking,
I'm with you. I don't think so.
If you're asking what the reaction of the fan base would be, no.
Trading Dom Canzone and Lazaro Montes away, what would the fan base reaction be?
Well, you could be getting Shohei back, and the fan base would say no because it involves Laz.
I actually don't think it's the craziest thing ever because he's still got a bunch of control left, and he's relatively young.
Mm-hmm.
You could sell a team. Like what the Mariners were sold from the Diamondbacks when they went out and traded for him, and what kind of player he could be. So you never know. I do think, though, if they're not planning on trading for an outfielder, there's no chance Dom Canzone gets moved.
No, it would only be if you think you're going to upgrade.
Because there's no other outfield option. Unless you're planning to move Raley back to the outfield full-time and trade for, say, Josh Naylor, okay, that might be different. Raley doesn't play another inning at first base the rest of the season. He goes back to right field. Josh Naylor plays every day at first base. Donovan Solano comes off the bench, and that works out a little bit better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there's some options, but the point being, Canzone hitting the way he's hitting right now is a very much plus for this team. And they've needed the spark toward the bottom of the lineup. They've gotten it from him.
And they'd be in much more of a strain if he was not, because if he wasn't doing this, you'd have to sit here and make a decision on which position you'd want a major upgrade at. Because say Dom Canzone was doing what he was doing first few times he's been up at the big league level with the Mariners, and you sit there and say, okay, we have a negative in right field, and we still want to go trade for a first baseman. What do we choose here? What would the decision be?
Whoever the best bat available is.
At that point, it would probably be first base. So you'd go out there, you'd do that, and then you'd shuffle your roster otherwise. But Dom Canzone does make it a little easier for you. A little bit more defined. So that works out. It's still defined that you're going to go get Gino and Josh Naylor. You should go get Gino and Josh Naylor.
Yeah, I don't know if they will, but they should.
Yeah, they should. What if they trade Dom Canzone back to the Diamondbacks?
For Gino?
Sure.
Just everybody goes home.
Or hear me out. I know the Diamondbacks bullpen stinks. You trade Carlos Vargas back as well. And you can get Sebi out of retirement and trade him as well.
I think the Diamondbacks would be thrilled. Just thrilled. You just now have to work in the Guardians to get Seawald back too.
And they're selling. They stink.
J-Ram? Question mark?
Dom Canzone, Lazaro Montes, and Harry Ford to the Guardians.
Sure. What's his
And
contract?
it's not like J-Ram's making a whole lot of money.
Yeah, how many years into that new deal is he? I'm curious.
He only signed for, what was it, 7 years?
Yeah, he's got 3.5 years left. So to be honest, the argument around J-Ram would be the same idea as Acuna.
He's just older.
Obviously, he's older. So you would be getting J-Ram for ages 32, 33, 34, 35. So, yeah, he's older. But I don't know if he's exactly slowing down either.
He's shown zero signs of slowing down.
No. I'd be down.
And you wouldn't have to give up. You wouldn't have to give up the same package for J-Ram as you would for Acuna, I don't think.
You'd still have to give up a lot, but not as much.
No, because Acuna is 6 years or 5 years younger than J-Ram. But
right.
That's interesting to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe, you know what? Now that I just brought that up in real time, that sounds like another podcast episode moving forward. Who wants to talk about J-Ram? I do. Mariners need a third baseman.
There are some trade targets on the Guardians. Their roster overall is not very impressive, but You got J-Ram. You got Clase. I mean, there's other guys in that bullpen. Cade Smith. If you want to shell out prospects, like there are some elite options there.
I think we may be talking about them in the coming weeks. Sign me right up.
And you'll have a lot more ammo as of Sunday to talk about, and guys you could potentially trade with this upcoming MLB draft, Lyle. We've been highlighting. Before we get to Aram here, we want to do our number 2 MLB Draft Spotlight. This guy might have the most helium of anyone we've talked about so far that Mariners fans look at and they say, I want to draft this guy. Our number 2 MLB Draft Spotlight is LSU left-hander Kade Anderson, the biggest riser in this entire draft.
Would there be a single person upset about the Mariners making this pick? I think the answer is no. I think there would be a consensus celebration if the Mariners were to draft Kade Anderson at number 3 overall. I think if the Mariners themselves see Kade Anderson at number 3 overall, they are taking that name and running to the podium with it.
It is hard to poke any sort of hole in what Kade Anderson has to offer. He's very durable this year. He was a Bulldog. Just think about his last college start. He threw a 130-pitch complete game shutout in the College World Series against a really good Coastal Carolina team on the biggest stage. You love to see that from a guy who's only pitching in his second college season at the age of 20. He'll be 21 on draft day. My favorite thing about Kade Anderson, yeah, he's got a plus fastball. There's a lot of really good traits there. He throws it from this 3/4 slot. It's got some ride to it. It's got some cut to it. It's a really good pitch. But if you look at the rest of his arsenal, it's hard to poke a hole at really whatever else he does. I think people really like his sweeper the best, but I'm looking at MLB Pipeline. They have his changeup graded higher than his baby sweeper, as our friends at Just Baseball put it, on their draft profile for Kade Anderson. The changeup's rated higher, and his curveball is also supposed to be plus as well. You look at an arsenal like that with good command, and it's hard to find any sort of negative in the repertoire and offerings of what Kade Anderson has to offer. It is a very all-around profile of what he offers if you're going to draft him and you're going to put him in the minor leagues. That's why some people come out and say, yeah, if the Angels take him, Kade Anderson could be a big leaguer by September. Because it's a profile where it already seems pretty polished.
Oh, it's polished. If the Angels take him and do that, they're incredibly stupid per usual. But yes, he is polished. Mm-hmm. I think we can agree he should not be in the big leagues in September.
He shouldn't probably throw another pitch this year. And I'll tell you why. But if you have something else you'd like to say, I'll let you get to that first.
I just love the fact that he's a 4-pitch mix guy. All 4 pitches are already pretty solid. You mentioned the good command. I also like the adversity he showed. I know it's hard to quantify that, but he got lit up pretty good against West Virginia in the Super Regional. And for some people, that could be a red flag. And for some pitchers, you could let that spiral, especially late in the year. Kade Anderson didn't let that spiral. Look, he had a great second half to his year at LSU. He had one blip on the radar against West Virginia. And then after that, what does he do? He goes out and tosses 7 innings of 1-run ball against Arkansas in Omaha. Then he turns around in the College World Series final and pitches the start that he's now famous for with the 9-inning complete game shutout against Coastal Carolina. And by the way, he punched out 10 in that game. This is a pretty polished player, top to bottom, with the pitch mix, with quality command, with a fastball that rises, by the way, which you know the Mariners love. They love those low slot fastball elevation, like induced vertical break type heaters. And this could be another guy they add to that mix. And I'll tell you what, if he's there at 3, I bet you the Mariners jump on it.
And they love to get to work on that profile. So here's the concern I have with Kade Anderson. I don't know if this is the biggest red flag in the world, but he does have sort of a very small sample of what I guess he's shown and what he's performed, like what the results have said when he stepped on a mound and pitched at the college level. Kade Anderson in April of 2022, his junior year of high school, I think midway through his junior year, had Tommy John. So he misses 22. He misses 23, his draft year. He was going to be a pretty high pick as a high schooler if he didn't have Tommy John, but he ended up having Tommy John, so he made it to LSU. Then in 2024, he only threw 39 innings his freshman year with the Tigers before this upcoming season throwing 119 innings. So that's great. I'm glad he had the season he did. He was one of the best pitchers in the country, if not the best pitcher in the country, in the best college baseball conference in America, facing future pros every single weekend. Fabulous. Great. The thing is, if you look at essentially the 3 years prior, there's not a whole lot else to go off of. So if you're making your evaluation of Kade Anderson on this year, great. But understand there is year-to-year variance in pitching, and we haven't just seen a whole lot of it from Kade as he's grown up and come along as a prospect. Think about it. We have data from him as a 20-year-old and then early, I think, 16-year-old, and that's about it.
Can you think of anybody else that had one really big year down in Baton Rouge and propelled themselves into a number 1 pick or a top 3 pick?
I mean, are you talking about the guy who won the John Olerud Award the season before and Mr. Paul Skeens?
I am, but nobody was even talking about him as a top 5 pick when he transferred to LSU.
But at least Paul Skeens had thrown and pitched a decent amount. Kade Anderson essentially didn't pitch for 2 years. Not as much, not on a stage.
It's not that uncommon for a pitcher to have one big year and propel their draft stock. That's what happened to Durangelo last year. Durangelo's first year at Mississippi State, I'm pretty sure his ERA started with a 5. And then he was great in 24. The Mariners loved him. They took him, and he's been awesome. And Liam Doyle's kind of a similar deal, where he only had one big year at Tennessee. He only had one big college year, but now he's going to get drafted high.
And that's a fair point. Here's another guy I think of. This isn't a perfect comparison because he played 3 years in college and not 2. Asa Lacy.
Yeah, that's a decent one. Oh, sorry. Let me rephrase. Durangelo's ERA in 2023 at Mississippi State was 8.10.
So it's not good. It's not the... Again, look, this doesn't mean Kade Anderson's going to suck. I'm just saying there's a smaller sample to evaluate off of than some other pitchers. And, I mean, that's fine. Sometimes guys as freshmen don't pitch as much as they do as sophomores and juniors, which is totally normal. I'm just saying in the ramp-up for Kade Anderson, you didn't get quite to see as much as maybe you get to see with some other guys. So Asa Lacy's the guy I bring up here because they're both college SEC lefties drafted probably in the top 4. Asa Lacy as a freshman at Texas A&M through 39 innings. He was really good. In 2019 as a sophomore through 88 innings as a starter was really good. And then his junior year at Texas A&M had a .75 ERA in 24 innings before going number 4 overall to the Royals. And Asa Lacy has not made it very far at all in the minor leagues. To say, we drafted Asa Lacy number 4 based off of 24 innings he threw his junior year. Not totally off of, but those 24 innings were a big part of him going number 4 overall and his helium of his draft stock. Kade Anderson's got more than that, but it is just that year we're going off of.
Well, you're seeing exactly why this draft class has no slam dunks, even at number 1, because you're even pointing out faults here with Kade Anderson. This is why it is not clear who's going to be the first pick off the board, the first 2, 3 picks off the board. It could go a number of ways. We don't know how this is going to shake out on Sunday night. Again, we previewed Liam Doyle at 10 or 11 on our list. There's a world the Nationals like Liam Doyle so much that he's their favorite guy in the draft, and they took him at 1. There's a world Eli Willits could go 1. There's a world a lot of guys could go number 1. Kade Anderson obviously is one of them. But it is so spread out, and there is no consensus in this draft class that makes it all that much more exciting for this weekend, is we don't know how this is all going to play out. But if the Mariners see Kade Anderson at number 3, I bet you they're jumping.
For the Skeens comparison you threw out, by the way, in case you're curious, 26 innings his freshman year, 85 2/3 his sophomore year. Then when he went to LSU, threw 122.
Yeah, so more sample, but was not projected to be a top 5 pick when he transferred.
He was going to go high, but right, he was not going to go number 1. That's true. That part's absolutely true.
So we'll see. And according to Jay Johnson, Kade Anderson's head coach, he says this is the best pitcher in the country and this is the easy number 1 pick in the MLB draft. Will the Nationals take him up on that? I don't know. Will an interim general manager feel differently? We'll see.
Yeah, how weird is that?
I don't know. It is very weird.
Do you think the Nationals keep their draft board?
Probably, because I'm sure the assistant GM was working on this very, very closely with Mike Rizzo even before Rizzo was let go. So I would assume. I will say this for Mariners fans. I don't know how much you want to put stock into this. I will just throw it out there. Kade Anderson is a Scott Boras guy. So take that for what you will. And look, TJ and I might see this a little bit differently. I will say, we know what Boras' relationship happens to be with the Mariners, and it's not a positive one. There are not a lot of high-profile Scott Boras clients in the minor leagues for the Mariners right now. I don't know if that's a coincidence. I don't know if that was intentional, but it is something to note.
Who are the current high-profile Scott Boras guys in the minor leagues, if you know off the top of your head?
For the Mariners?
No, just in general.
Off the top of my head, I might have to go look, and it's not always as public when they're in the minors, but Joe Doyle, our friend, that tweeted on Sunday that both Kade Anderson and the guy we will talk about for our final draft profile for Friday's show are Scott Boras guys. The guy we're going to get to at the end, there's no shock he's a Scott Boras guy because, well, he may have some family members that were also Scott Boras people. So I would say that, look, if you want some off the top of my head, Ellie De La Cruz was a Scott Boras guy all the way back in the minors. He was wearing Boras stuff back when I saw him in Dayton when he was in high A. Spencer Torkelson was a Boras guy when he was drafted.
Right.
And he got his way through the minor leagues. There are a lot of these high-profile guys that become Scott Boras guys. So they're out there.
I'd be curious to ask how much of it is based off of the Boras relationship with the Mariners and how much of it is just, it just so happens the Mariners guy is not a Boras guy. Like Torkelson, for example. The Mariners had no shot at drafting Spencer Torkelson.
Right.
So how would that have worked? Right.
I don't know. Again, I don't know.
So that's why this draft, I think, will be very interesting. I think it is different from my perspective in terms of an agent dealing with an organization in the draft where, again, if Boras still sets a number for his guys in the draft of what they'll sign at, and if the Mariners offer that amount, is he going to tell them no? Probably not.
Probably
now,
not.
If it comes down to an extension 8 years after the draft, that's a little different, right?
Right. So we'll see. It'll be
something
very
to think about.
It'll be interesting. I think that wrinkle has an interesting effect, and we'll see if that plays any factor or not. We don't know, but something to note.
Now, it does help the Mariners have such a big bonus pool in this because they have the 35th pick as well, that if Boras, tries to strong-arm him a little bit, they do have the money. If they want the player that bad, they have the money to make it happen.
Right.
And I'm mostly talking about our last guy on this list because I feel like he has the most leverage for money in this draft, Mr. Ethan Holiday.
Yeah. So we will, shocker, spoiler,
Yeah.
There's one guy we haven't gotten to. You haven't heard his name yet. He's probably the most famous guy in this draft. We'll get to him on Friday. But we'll see. And honestly, we'll see with Kade Anderson, too. I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. If the Mariners want him that badly, though, you're right. They could just sign him for the money that his camp asks for. So we'll see.
Yeah.
That's number 2. And like I said, we're getting real close. I can't wait for Sunday. I think it's going to be a blast. So
It's going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to it. All right, quick word before we get to Aram. We're going to talk to you about, you guys know, our friends over at Pagach's Pub 85. Awesome spot to hang out. Maybe you want to watch the draft this weekend. You could head over there. There's 20 TVs in that place. You want to watch the Mariners. You want to watch a bunch of sporting events. You want to watch the draft. It's all there for you. There's pool, darts. There's great food. And you guys, if you go during happy hour, there's drinks that are $3 and $4 all the way from 2 to 6 p.m. on Monday through Friday. Long happy hours, great specials, really good deals, and there's a bunch of things to do. So if you want to plan a time with your friends, head over there, Pagach's Pub 85 in Kirkland.
So you just heard us talk about Kade Anderson, Aram Leighton of Just Baseball, our friend of the podcast, recurring guest, also has some to say on Kade Anderson. But we, pretty much go rapid fire around the draft with Aram to get his perspective on what are some of the defining traits of these players, what the benefit would be of the Mariners taking a high school shortstop versus, say, Iva Arquette, what the gap is between all the college bats, what the gap is between all the college arms. Aram's pretty plugged in. He knows what he's talking about, and he, I think, will give you guys a really good preview of what to expect when the draft comes up on Sunday.
Every big name we hit on with Aram, every guy that the Mariners might be tied to at the top of that draft, we talk about with Aram. And Aram does it as good as anybody in the business, man, which is pretty awesome considering he's our age. He's not that far out of college like we are, so he hasn't been doing it forever, but in such short time, he's worked his tail off at this. His analysis is great. And you guys are going to learn a lot. Like, you've heard TJ and I talk about a bunch of these guys, but Aram's really going to go in depth and give everybody even more perspective. And he'll hit on some Mariners prospects in this too that people should be on the lookout for in the second half.
We won't keep you guys any longer. Let's get you to the interview with Aram Leighton.
All right, we've got our friend Aram Leighton on with us. He's the co-founder of Just Baseball. He's also the co-host of the Just Baseball Show, the Call-Up podcast. He's getting all set and ready for the MLB Draft. Aram, first off, it's been way too long since we've actually had you on the podcast, so thanks so much for hopping on. And also, is this like your Christmas? We're this close to draft time?
It's exciting. It's up there, man. It definitely is. I think there's something about the process of just getting to know all these players that you hit a point where, okay, there's no more games being played for the most part. The combine's done. You feel like you know most of what you need to know on the top guys. And then it transfers to, well, what do the teams think? Where are these guys actually going to get drafted? Because now I know at least I have my opinions, and then I get super eager. So, well, first of all, also, thank you so much for having me on again. I was waiting for the invite, so I'm pumped up to be back on. It's always an honor. And, this is a really fun time, and I imagine for Mariners fans, it's got to be super fun with a top 3 pick here to have in your back pocket.
And everyone's really excited for it. They haven't picked this high in quite a while. I think Mike Zunino was the last time they picked this high. So, throwback name there, Aram. Yeah, Florida guy. Here's a good general question to start with this draft. What is the theme of this draft?
I would say it's funny because I'm going to say I think it's a little bit more prep heavy, and then there's a real scenario where 3 college arms go off the board in the top 3. But I would say it's high school bats and high school shortstops because I think it's also relative to last year as well. I think you could maybe compare it to some other drafts, and maybe it wouldn't feel as high school heavy, but it's kind of like when you get out of the hot tub and then you jump into the pool, and like the pool wasn't cold, but then it feels cold. I feel like that's almost where we're at here with this draft, because like last year, you had the 2 prep shortstops in Connor Griffin and Bryce Rayner, but it was so college heavy that now this year, there's so many different high school bats that could go in the top 10 that it feels even more extreme, I think, compared to what we had last year. So I would say that's the big theme here is just a lot more high school bats that could go in any spot. And then the other I'd say is lack of clarity and in a fun way, where it's just not that we knew for sure how things were going to run off last year, but I think this year you could probably make a case for any assortment of outcomes from number 1 to number 10, and no one would be able to say whether you're right or wrong. And that's the craziest part. And of course, draft is unpredictable by nature, but you've got a list of like 10 different names that could be considered in the top 3, maybe more than that, which we don't usually have it that wide.
Okay, so with that, and there being so much lack of clarity at the top of the draft, how many guys have true star potential in this draft? Because I think it's fair to say this draft isn't like 23, for example, when you have Skeens, Cruz, Langford, etc., just all roll off the board. Is there a bunch of true star potential in this draft class, or is that lacking a little bit in your opinion?
It's funny because like amateur scouting is so nuts. I was talking about this, like where it can change so quickly, especially with the high school guys, where I mean, I don't think anybody was looking at Cam Smith as a college guy, even for example, your draft eligible sophomore as a potential star. It was a guy that we loved out of the draft. I know had him as a top 10 draft prospect for us, but I liked him a lot because I just thought the hit tool was underrated, the defense was underrated, and he's just going to be a really well-rounded player. Now he looks like he could have that star potential if it all comes together with what he's already doing out there, and that's a guy that slipped outside of the top 10. So you never necessarily know. Even Connor Griffin, I think people saw the star potential, but was he going to hit enough? I don't know. Clearly now he looks like he could be the number 1 prospect in baseball. I don't know if there's anybody that toolsy, though. When you look at the Connor Griffin archetype and the Rayner even archetype with the power there, I think you could probably make the case for a couple high school guys, but like a JoJo Parker, for example. I don't think he's ever going to be a star, but he has such a good chance to be a good big leaguer because he hits. But I look at like an Ethan Holiday. There's some hit tool questions, but that guy can be a star with the power, especially if he goes to Colorado. And then it depends on how you define a star pitching-wise, but I think any of the 3 lefties, you could make the case of them being able to put it all together and achieve that ceiling. But I would argue that there maybe isn't quite as high of a ceiling with a lot of these guys here, but there's a lot to like. And then, of course, Seth Hernandez. You're going to have a ton of concern around a high school righty anytime you're taking him in the top 10. But that guy could truly, truly be a star. I think you could argue he has as high of a ceiling as anybody in the draft. But I would say that depending on your patience on the high school shortstops, because anything can happen there, I would say it's kind of hard to see that sky-high potential that maybe some of the guys have had in the last few drafts.
The guy I think a lot of Mariner fans have looked at and a lot of prospect analysts and draft analysts have looked at to have the most helium in this draft has been Kade Anderson. And I think that's made people want him more at number 3. But the more we go on and the more mock drafts that come out, you see that he's probably not going to be available at number 3. Still could happen, but it seems more unlikely. Why has he shot up so much this year to the point where, as many people thought earlier in the season, he'll be available at 3 if you want him, if he would get picked in the top 3, but now it doesn't even seem like it.
I mean, the live look I got in Omaha was pretty nuts. I just positioned myself behind home plate and just watched this guy go to work, and I'm imagining if the scouts that were all out there seeing what he was able to do, it wasn't just the fact that he was dominating, it was how he was dominating, where like you're watching a guy just pitch with polish. And of course, the fastball, it has good characteristics. So at 93, 94, he was touching some 5s and 6s, but it was the assortment of secondaries off of that really impressed me. And he would go like from edge of the rubber on the inside for like a left-handed hitter, and then to the other side of the rubber for a right-handed hitter, and then just execute. His fastball, slider, curveball, changeup. And I think when you look at a left-hander like that can throw 4 quality pitches for a strike, has good fastball characteristics, and was maintaining his velocity deep into starts, it was just one of those scenarios there where I think you can just envision that playing at the big league level so soon. And again, maybe there's a world where you have Liam Doyle put it all together and he has a higher ceiling. Who knows? I mean, that's the crazy part about the draft is, especially with pitchers, a couple little tweaks. I mean, Brian Wu, for example, you see the secondaries that he's found, and all of a sudden he looks like he could be one of the better pitchers in the game when he's going, right? And it was just fastball for a while, and it was a really unique fastball, but it was very fastball heavy. I think with Anderson, it's like you don't have to do much here. You barely have to touch him. Like, you could just drop him in a pro ball and say go. And I think that part of it was a big reason why he kind of flew up the ranks. And then I think another thing that was really encouraging to evaluators was he had that rough start against West Virginia. He gives up 6 earned and just flips that back around. Next start out, dominates against Arkansas, and then does what we saw against Coastal Carolina on 130 pitches. So I think seeing that moxie and that ability to just bounce back, he did that earlier in the year as well against Alabama. He gave up 4 homers, then right back with 7 innings, 7 1/3 of 11 Ks. So I think having that ability to just turn the page and bounce back, he screams big leaguer. Even if it's not an ace, he's going to be a really good big league arm for a long time.
Of those 3 lefties, is his upside the highest?
I think his floor is the highest, personally. I think the upside is also probably right there. I think you could argue with Liam Doyle's just ridiculous fastball characteristics and sheer velocity that if you can develop his secondaries a little bit further, he could have the highest ceiling just in terms of how electrifying he can be. But I'm of the belief that if you can execute 4 pitches, even if you're a little less stuffy, he's going to execute. He's going to have a 70% strike rate across most of his secondaries, or at least that's what he had this past year. That may end up still pushing the ceiling, quote unquote, higher. It's like the George Kirby conversation, right? So I think Doyle, in terms of raw stuff, if it all works out, could have the highest ceiling. But I think when you blend ceiling and floor, I think Kade Anderson's still comfortably the best.
I think what TJ's really trying to find out here from you is, of these 3 lefties, which one is the Angels going to take and put in the big leagues by September? A.K.A. is Kade going to fall to 3 because they take one of the other lefties and then just place him right in the big leagues?
I think they would dream of taking – the Angels would dream of taking Kade Anderson because he might just skip the minor leagues, period. But then when I look at where the Angels may pivot from there, I think there's a lot to like about Jamie Arnold and the funkiness and everything that he has going on. And I know some people have made the case that that could be a guy that you also fast track because of what he has with the slider and just the deception and the strike throwing overall that he's had. But I do think that that's a player that I'd actually want to work a little bit slower with, because I love the fit potentially in Seattle as a guy that funky release, nasty slider, things that you could probably tighten up and adjust, really smart pitching mind. Really enjoyed talking to him actually on the call-up, and like a guy that I think would be receptive to tweaks and adjustments, whereas Liam Doyle, even if he's 60% fastball usage, the Angels could just throw him in the bullpen tomorrow and say, let's go. Or they could just throw him in the rotation and say, I don't care what you throw. If you're getting outs, 5 innings, we're cool with it. So I could see them being a little bit more comfortable fast-tracking Liam Doyle just because the stuff's going to play right away. And if it does go 1-2 that way, I wouldn't be upset if I'm the Mariners with the opportunity to develop a Jamie Arnold and get him to a point where he could end up having the most unique arsenal with the most unique release characteristics that ends up playing really well from the left side.
Jamie was supposed to be the number 1 pick preseason. Now it's likely he's not the number 1 pick anymore. Was that more reflective of the players around him? Did people learn something new about Jamie this year? What was it?
I think it was the consistency of the secondary, or not even secondaries, I would say. The consistency of everything besides the slider. The slider was almost like the primary for him. It's like when you're playing MLB The Show and you have a pitcher come in and you click A or whatever the button may be for your thing, and it's a slider, and you're like, oh, wait, I thought I was throwing a fastball. But it's because it's the pitch he throws the most. Like, that's kind of where Jamie Arnold was at this year, where like it was about 46% fastball usage and then like 42% slider usage, but he would find himself in spots where later in the season it was like 50% slider usage and 40% fastball usage. So the slider was so darn good that I think he was able to just lean on that really heavily, but he did become a little bit dependent on that. And I think part of that was, hey, I need to go out there and dominate a lot of these games to try to put the team on my back and help us make a run here. But it did also maybe take him away a little bit from what the scouts wanted to see, which was fastball command and consistency. And I think there's a little bit of concern if you're splitting hairs with his ability to get consistent platoon splits, right? To get righties out at the same clip that he gets lefties out. And that's natural when you have that high slider usage. I think it was predominantly the strike rate across everything other than the slider, which was about 57%. Slider strike rate was like 71%. So it was more of a consistency thing, and you see a guy with a unique release, and you say, oh, well, maybe he can't sync it all up. I think he can, but the execution just wasn't quite there as much as it was at the end or at points of last year.
I want to throw a couple superlatives at you to hopefully give people listening kind of a decent idea of what to be looking for when the draft rolls around in about, a week and a half at the time of recording this. It'll be a few days when we release it. But I'll start with this. Best fit for the Mariners is who? Doesn't have to be the best player in the draft, but in your mind, who's the best fit?
I think Kade Anderson is the dream, obviously, because I look at the situation also for Seattle, right, where, like, of course, they've got all these arms here, but what, Castillo and Gilbert are two years away from free agency? Is that right?
Logan would be 2.5, right?
Yeah, Logan's 2.5 right now. Castillo, Aram, I think they're trading as soon as the calendar flips.
Yeah, and so I think from that perspective, and you look at the farm system, there's some intriguing arms, but nothing I think where you're plugging in and saying, hey, like this is a guy that can be another key piece for us moving forward. So I think an arm makes all the sense in the world. I know people are interested in Ava Arquette and things like that, and I don't know. I think when you look at the bats that they have throughout that farm system right now, I think you obviously go best player available, but you're going to have one of those arms available. So I think you could pretty much make the case for any of the three being a great fit, because I like Kade Anderson because it's as close to can't miss. I hate saying that in the draft as you can have. But then I also am excited about the idea of the Mariners being able to get more out of a Liam Doyle or a Jamie Arnold. So I think either way, it's a win-win. But I think any of the left-handed pitchers is a great scenario for them. And again, I still really am intrigued by the Jamie Arnold fit. I know it's a very different type of low release, but I do love that low release, and it's extremely low. It's like sub 5 feet. And sometimes generating that carry. He struggled with the four-seamer at points this year, which is interesting from that low release. It got hit really hard, but I think that's something that you get the Mariners pitching minds together. They can help make some subtle tweaks to Arnold and unlock that what we thought would be number 1 overall pick. So I think plan B, I like the Jamie Arnold fit a lot.
Okay, superlative number 2. Like I said, I got 2 more of these for you. Most upside in the draft. Who do you think?
Most upside. I think it would be Seth Hernandez. And it's also the lowest floor. It's really scary taking a prep arm in the top 10. It really is. But when you have a player like Seth Hernandez who, the feel for a changeup he already has, and we're talking about a kid that's 6'4", 200 pounds, works down the mound so comfortably already, fastball that can, low effort, get into the upper 90s. I feel like that's a guy that with that arsenal, you can just dream on a ridiculous amount of upside. So I would say Seth Hernandez.
Okay, actually, you kind of answered both the next couple superlatives in one right there, because I was going to ask you who you feel like the biggest risk is or who warrants the most concern toward the top of the draft. So let me follow up with this. I think Seth Hernandez is super interesting. I think like his upside is something you can dream on. But just so people have both sides, what warrants what people would call a potentially low floor?
Just the archetype, to be honest. And maybe that's not fair to Seth Hernandez, but just high school hard throwing right-handers have a rough track record. It's the same way that high school catchers in the draft have a rough track record. Does that mean every high school catcher is going to be a bad draft pick? Of course not. We've seen some really good high school catchers get drafted. I mean, you look at Harry Ford, he's turning out to be a nice piece, but even that's been a bit of a roller coaster, and he's a really good player. So it's more the archetype than anything. Between the health, between the volatility in general. Dylan Lesko, for example, I know he underwent Tommy John surgery prior to the draft, but that was a guy that was the biggest thing that I think people loved about him was, oh my gosh, that might be the cleanest delivery we've seen since Josh Beckett. This guy just fills up the zone. He can't throw strikes right now, and it's tough to see. So you just never know, and I think that's why that archetype ends up coming with so much volatility. But I'd also say Ethan Holiday, too, because it's massive power, but there's a chance he could move off of short, and there's the swing and miss concern relative to the other guys. So if he's moving to third and it's power over hit, he's got to really, really mash, and that all of a sudden puts some pressure.
For those who aren't familiar, tell us the difference between Ethan and his brother Jackson, who went number 1 overall a few years ago.
It's funny. They're actually like quite different, which is cool because I think it makes it easier to separate them a little bit, though it's never going to happen. Jackson, of course, a lot more hit tool driven, I think. A guy that I think you're seeing the power start to come through a bit more, but it was always about the hit tool and the approach, and that's why Jackson moved so quickly through the minor leagues. Whereas Ethan, I think is going to be a bit more of a project. He's a bit more physical, and you see that in the EVs and in the impact. And he's made, I think, a steady improvement in terms of the hit tool side of things. But I would say Holiday, you're looking at more of that big-bodied left side of the infield guy that gets a powerful but somewhat lofty swing off with or Ethan, I should say. With Jackson, it's more of that hit tool driven, speedy, can stick it short, but even him, it was more of the second base profile if he moved off of short, as we saw. Whereas Holiday, it's the third base profile if he moves off of short. So I think that almost is a great way of summing it up really simply, but it's what makes, I think, Ethan a little bit more risky, but also a higher ceiling potentially as well.
So that's one of the options for high school shortstops. There are 4 others Lyle and I have talked about that could be an option there at number 3. Eli Willits, JoJo Parker, Steele Hall, Billy Carlson. What would be a reason the Mariners would pick any of the 4? Could you give me one for each of them?
Yeah, I would say ceiling on Holiday, right? I mean, you have an opportunity here to grab a power bat who I think has made progress to make his case to be able to potentially stick it short. And I look at a Cole Emerson and his progression at shortstop. He's turned himself into such a solid defender there. Maybe that was all Cole Emerson, but you got to give the Mariners some credit there too. So maybe they have some confidence in their ability to develop guys on that left side of the infield now and potentially stick it short. So that could be an encouraging aspect. But I would say the ceiling, because you have a lot of good bats in the system right now, and you could go with a hit tool-driven guy like JoJo Parker, but if he puts it all together, it could look a lot like Cole Young. And that's fine. That's still a really good player. I like Cole Young. But at 3, maybe you want to shoot a little bit higher. So, but with JoJo, I think he's a good candidate because the floor is a little bit higher perceived to be. The hit tool is so darn good, and it seems like he's going to have a great chance to be that Cole Young type. When you look at an Eli Willits, I think he's that sum of the parts, some of his parts kind of guy, which is why I think he might be the best of the bunch in the shortstops. There might be Ethan Holiday puts together, he might have a higher ceiling, but I like the across-the-board, well-rounded player. And as we've seen, power has become easier for teams to develop in guys. Obviously, if you're 5'8" and don't have a much projection physically, like you're not going to be able to get a guy like that to start producing more power. But an Eli Willits type who can stick at shortstop, who has the feel to hit, who I think flashes a little bit more power potential than a Parker, like that's a guy that I think you can mold and push forward. And again, I look at what the Mariners have done with some of their guys that I think Emerson fits the mold a little bit too, where Willits could be a good example of maybe somebody that they could get more out of. And then Billy Carlson, I think that's the other guy that has that upside. So if you wanted to roll the dice on upside and the fact that you could probably save money, because I think Carlson's camp would see that, hey, if we don't go here, there's a lot of other teams that are probably going to call and do their due diligence. But if he doesn't give a little bit of a discount, he could find himself sliding down to that 8, 9, 10 spot kind of quickly. So Mariners could get creative and probably carve out the most savings with a Carlson there. At least that's how I see it, because there's more risk with the hit tool, and he's a freak athlete with an 80 arm. So that would be the roll of the dice toolsy play that could save you some money. But I think Willits gives you that some of his parts really well-rounded game.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Is Steel Hall not going at 3?
That would be another savings option. I would be very surprised, but nothing I think is purely shocking there. And I think when you look at what Steel Hall is capable of as just a guy that can absolutely fly and stick it short, I wouldn't rule anything out. But I think that other group is just ahead of him.
Yeah, so, I mean, and what you mentioned there about somebody like Carlson makes sense, especially when you're a team like the Mariners that, for example, last year got creative to overslot Sloan to get him in the second round. Personally, I hope when you're picking at a spot like this, you just take the swing on the guy that's gonna has the best chance to be a star. But if you're the Mariners and you like to get creative, there is a world they could underslot somebody at 3, try to shoot a little bit higher when they get back to the end of the first round. Let me follow up with a couple of the answers you just gave. Number one would be, can you tell us a little bit more about Eli Willits? Because he feels like a guy that has just consistently been there in every mock draft, but he feels like he's almost so much less famous at this point than someone like an Ethan Holiday and a couple of the other guys that have been talked about at the top of the draft, like Kade Anderson. But again, he's always right in that conversation. So, like, why do people like this guy?
I think it's just the well-rounded nature of his game. And, I look at a Cooper Pratt right now who just gets rave reviews in the Brewers organization for what he does, and nothing jumps off the page there. But every scout you talk to, every team in their internal lists, they seem to have this guy as, top 50 prospect in baseball because of the way that he is able to impact the game in so many different ways. And I think that's something that really takes a lot of pressure off of when you're looking at it from this perspective. JoJo Parker, for example, the hit tool is his carrying trait. You don't know if he's going to stick it short. You don't know how much power is going to be there. If that guy doesn't hit like you think he's going to hit, it's a it's steep uphill battle to be that 2-3 WAR player. With Willits, it's like, okay, maybe the glove wasn't as good as we thought, but if the hit and power and speed and everything else plays, that's going to be just fine, or vice versa. So I think it gives you more opportunity to be right, and I think that's a huge part of it, where you can look at a guy here that's 50s to 55s across the board, potentially a 60 runner, and even if you misjudged one aspect of his game, your confidence interval is higher because he can impact the game in so many different ways. And I think what he's really proven to do here is that he can stick at shortstop, and I think once he really showed that side of things and that the hit tool was above average, I think people were willing to say, hey, we don't see sky-high ceiling or tools off the charts right now, but we didn't see that with a lot of other guys in the prep ranks that have made leaps over the last couple of years. So I think that's the big thing, is even if one aspect of his game maybe isn't as prevalent as you thought, there's so many other areas where he can make an impact that I think it makes scouts and amateur, just scouting departments feel a little bit more comfortable about taking a guy like this.
My other follow-up to that was just so people hear both sides of the Ethan Holiday argument, because for people that aren't as tuned in on the draft as you are, you obviously hear the name, his family ties, he's got the chance to be really good, and you talked about his upside is high and his ceiling could be a 30 to 35 home run type third baseman. But when you say there is some risk associated with him, if things were to not work out with Holiday, are you talking something like a 220 hitting, high strikeout type third baseman?
That is the concern, right? Like, 'cause he's 6'4", like 195 pounds. Like, it's big, and so, like, yeah, if he moves to third now, it's like, okay, you really need to mash. But he could be that Kyle Seager type, and you feel good about that, right? And like, that isn't even, I think, a peak outcome. So there's still ways that he can be successful. But what does make me feel confident in the fact that even if the hit tool was 40 grade or 45 grade, the plate discipline, the feel for the strike zone is so solid that he can be that 3 true outcome slugger. So it gives him a good backup plan. But I do think that ultimately is the concern is that the hit tool won't totally be there. But I do think that when you see what he can do from a power perspective, where he's at already physically, I think that's really encouraging. The other side of it too, though, is Willits is like 8 months younger than an Ethan Holiday. So when you're talking about draft models and things like that, of course, that's gonna bump up Willits a little bit more too, especially for a Holiday who's a little bit more physically, I think, mature at this point as well. But when you have the improvements, at least that he's slowly making with his left-handed swing, and the potential power-wise, I think there's a lot to like there. But you just got to be willing to handle the risk. The other side of it too is I don't know if Ethan Holiday is going to be as willing to take a pay cut at 3 as maybe some of the other targets may be.
Mm-hmm. Let's throw another hypothetical at you, Aram. Let's say the Mariners want a shortstop, but instead of one of the high schoolers, they end up deciding they want Iva Arquette. Why would they be making that decision?
I think it would be price dependent. I think if you have an because I love the way that the Mariners have maneuvered the draft the last couple of years, and I think for Arquette, you could have an opportunity here to potentially save a little bit. Who knows, though, because you could end up having a situation where Arquette has a team right behind him. Maybe the Cardinals are all over it, or maybe the Rockies are all over it, and maybe you aren't able to save much money. But if there's some other guys that they like that they think that they can overslot, later, like I don't think Kason Cunningham would fall, but they could buy him down. So then you have a prepster there, and you're able to get your college guy. I think the main way that I would be pushed in that direction would really be because of the savings. Otherwise, given where the Mariners farm system's at and the talent that they have in general, I would probably lean towards the prep kids because Arquette, he's great. I think there's a lot to like there. There's still always the chance that he moves off of short. And I think there's a little bit of swing and miss there for a college bat that there's still some risk to be implied there. He's 6'5", 220, long levers. Like there's still some risk for potentially the first college bat off the board. And so if you're not really saving any there, I may lean towards the high school guys that could maybe have a little bit more well-rounded of a game.
And what's the gap between him and the rest of the college bats? So let's say Ike Irish.
I would say still a decent gap. Nothing crazy. I think Irish has done a great job of closing that gap, but I think there's still more power to dream on with Arquette, and I think that's what really ends up pushing him up. And if he does move to third, I think it could be a really good third. Whereas, Irish, if he catches, that would be great, but it doesn't look like he's really going to be doing that. It's going to be corner outfield, and he's got to really mash there. So I also look at Irish with a little bit more underlying swing and miss and a little bit more ground ball. I think I feel a little bit better about the hit tool translating for Arquette, and the raw power is right there, if not slightly above. So you get a little bit more defensive value, a little bit more hit I think, confidence, and then the power is right there, if not slightly more prevalent, at least in the raw territory.
You're not going to have a perfect answer on this, but I am still curious to see about the ballpark you're in when getting on this topic. But you talked about if the Mariners were to take Iva Arquette at 3, there would be potentially some money saved. How much under slot do you think they'd save by drafting him?
It really depends on what the other teams are thinking, and where they're gravitating towards. Because if I do think that we could see a scenario where, if let's say they want to go the Arquette route, that means that one of the left-handed arms fell, right? And if one of the left-handed arms fell, that very well could be a Rockies pick. I think the Rockies would love Jamie Arnold, the way that they target funky, weird-throwing lefties. And then you're telling me that the Cardinals are going to pass on a Holiday? I don't know if they would do that, because that'd be another presumption that you would be able to get a Holiday there. So then that means all of a sudden Arquette could be slipping to 6 or 7. Does he want to play for the Pirates or the Marlins? I don't know. Especially with their infrastructure hitting development-wise. I know Connor Griffin's been great. I think that's more credit to Connor Griffin. All of a sudden, you could be slipping to that 6-7 spot. So I would say probably the savings would be the difference between the 3rd spot and probably the 6th spot. So I would say somewhere between the slot value of the 5th selection and the 6th selection. So I don't have that exactly in front of me right now, but I'd imagine it's still a pretty nice chunk of change there. If they're able to save that much, that could help you buy down a guy. But I would say probably about 2 spots there worth of slot value would be my uneducated guess.
Yeah, that is interesting, just because, I think a lot of people, and not that you're ever drafting to please a fan base, but I'm just thinking about what the general perception would be. I feel like a lot of people would be very happy to see Arquette get taken at 3. And if the Mariners did that, but then they also saved enough money to really overslot somebody at that late first round pick in the comp round, I don't know. I think I guess I had the mindset of they're going to have to really underslot somebody at 3 if they want to save and really get creative at the end. But maybe that's not true. Maybe even just somebody like an Arquette saves you enough to get what you want to get later on.
Well, the slot value is 9.5 at the 3rd overall pick, and it quickly drops to 8.1 million at the 5th pick. So even if you wanted to go slightly above, you could go 8.5. You're saving $1 million there. And if I'm him, I think I'm jumping on the opportunity to, like, there's a big drop off between the Mariners to the Rockies. Of course, the Cardinals would be a good opportunity, but who knows? The Cardinals may be more, and I think I would guess that they'd be more in on a high school bat there. They haven't done that in a while, but it could make sense in this draft for them, especially with the way things could shake out. And then again, would you rather be signing with the Mariners or ending up potentially making less money anyways with the Pirates or the Marlins? So I do think they could end up saving $1 million potentially and still taking an Arquette there, unless there's a lot of steam for Arquette to the Angels or still to the Cardinals. And then at that point, the leverage kind of gets lost. But the leverage, what you always have is you really want to roll the dice and see what happens runoff-wise here. Look at what happened to J.J. Weatherholt last year, right? Like he didn't take that full discount with the Guardians, and he slipped all the way to 7. Like that stuff always happens, so you never know.
Yeah, and then with Arquette too, 1, you'd be playing for a better organization, but 2, like, not that this factors everything into account, but he's familiar with the area, played at UW, played at Oregon State, like has the Pacific Northwest ties, all that.
That doesn't hurt. It really doesn't.
The later we get in the draft, Aram, the more random it gets. But if you're to give your best guess, at 35, the Mariners' 2nd pick in this draft, could you give us a couple ideas what the Mariners might be looking at?
I'd guess they buy somebody down. And they do a great job of doing that, right? And so I think it, of course, depends what they do with the first pick. But let's operate under the assumption they go arm with the first pick and don't save as much. That's where I could see maybe I don't know if they'd be able. I don't think he's going to slip there, but like a Caden Bodine would be a fun pick. I know that they have Cal Riley, but that'd be a hard player to pass on. Slater DeBrun, I think, has had a lot of helium as well, and that's another kid that's from the Northwest area, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like Slater DeBrun makes a lot of sense for me. He actually gets some Corbin Carroll comps, and because he's a little bit more compact, toolsy. I think a fun player that you could potentially snag if he slips a little bit further. But I also think if they could find a way to buy down Case and Cunningham, that's a hit over everything guy. But I love the swing. And if you go, let's say you go bat earlier and you save some money, but you go kind of higher risk, higher variance bat, Cunningham could be a guy that you buy down as a higher floor bat as well. And we've seen them not shy away from going 3 Prepster bats in one draft. We were together when they did that a couple years ago. So I could see that Case and Cunningham would make a lot of sense if they could save enough to buy him down. But I do really like the Slater DeBrun fit as a high school kid that they've probably gotten as many looks at as just about anybody, and does seem to be like a good fit. And then I would say Cruz Schoolcraft as well. Just another lefty who's had a lot of helium. There's some first-round discussion to him, but if he slips just a little bit, I could see the Mariners being all over that as well.
Super interesting. Man, I can't wait. We're getting so close to the draft that I'm just ready to see it all play out, because we've talked about these names now forever and we've gotten to know the class, but it's going to shake out here in just a few days when this episode releases, so I'm fired up for it.
And the feedback that I keep getting from some teams and just people involved in the process right now is basically once you get outside of the top 5, all hell is going to break. It's like no idea what could happen. Like you have a decent feeling about who the candidates are for the top 5, and then the net that you could cast outside of the top 5, apparently, like when you get from 5 to 15, could be a pool of like 30 players. So it is wide open, which then I think does trickle all the way down to that compensation pick, because there's always that player that slides out. He might think he's going to college. You save enough money, you can change his mind. And again, I think with the bonus pool situation here, the Mariners could have a little bit more to work with, but they still, I think, have more than enough to be able to get creative and make something happen.
Yeah, and it's crazy because you say there's more clarity in the top 5. There is about the general consensus of who will be up there, but nobody knows who's going 1 right now. It's like a total smokescreen. It could be Kade Anderson, but I don't think anybody's confident about it.
Nope. They just know that at least it's one of a few names, whereas then you get to 6 and 7, it could be one of 15 names. And that's why this draft is going to be so fun, but also so hard to predict.
We can get into some prospect stuff if we want to transition a little bit, because we did want to hit on some guys that the Mariners have in the system before we let you go here. If you were to take a look, which I know you know this system up and down, is there somebody you're pointing at and you're saying, I think this guy's really going to have a breakout second half?
Ooh. Breakout second half.
Or it could even be one of the blue chip guys and one of the higher end prospects that just has a really good second half.
It's funny because it's such a chalk answer, but just watching what he's been doing and looking at the batted ball quality, I do think that you're about to see Colt Emerson really take that step that we've been waiting for. He's already elevating the ball much more consistently of late. I've already talked about the defense and where I think he's at there, and I think just the fact that he's more comfortable at short in general is probably just allowing the game to come more easily to him, and he's not as overwhelmed and can kind of focus on hitting and that side of things. But when you look at the numbers, through his first 30 games this year, he had a 60% ground ball rate. Since then, that ground ball rate has dropped to 45%. The exit velocities have been there, right? The contact rates have been there. It's just been the launch angles and the spray. And for that to already be getting better here at 19 years old, I think he's going to have a monster second half. And not only just in this system, I think he's a candidate to, I think, be one of the better hitters in minor league baseball over the second half with, again, what you already had underlying and what he's already starting to do here. I think there's a lot to like in terms of the offensive ability there. And then I'm trying to think of like maybe a lower on the rankings kind of name that could, I guess, break out or show himself a little bit more. I want a healthy Johnny Farmelo so bad because I know that once he's healthy and ready to go, he's going to be putting up some monster numbers, and he was already doing it before he hit the IL again and had that rib issue. But I'm trying to think of another player that could really make that leap. But I think the Colt Emerson shout is just I think he's going to go nuts over this next couple months here.
I want to ask you about the guy that I think, besides Colt, would be the most popular name in the Mariners farm system right now is Lazaro Montes. He got promoted to Double-A a couple weeks ago. He's already been crushing some home runs. He's still shown the power up there in Double-A. The way Lyle and I have approached it, given he's so young at that level, is that you can give him an entire year in Double-A, then you even start thinking about what you're going to do next with him, because he'll still be one of the youngest players at that level, and if you want to promote him, he'll be one of the youngest players at the next level you promote him to as well. When you see him as a prospect and how he's developed this year, last year, what do you keep looking for in him at Double-A that he's going to need to clean up to go higher, and what have you liked and what's been positive?
What I like is he's getting back into the strength again, like in terms of, I think last year, and it was a good step to take. I think we saw him a little bit more contact oriented for his standards, and in terms of just like he wasn't getting his A swing off as consistently as you'd want, which sounds crazy because he hit 21 home runs, right? Like this isn't an indictment on him. It's more of just, I think you saw him surviving a bit more, and then he'd have these torrid stretches where he got really comfortable, but then there'd be stretches where it just seemed like he was on his heels a little bit, and there's a lot of B swings. The good news is his B swing is still a home run a lot of times, like if he catches it right. But this year, I'm just seeing him get that A swing off way more consistently. His hard hit rate has jumped by 14% this year to 50%, which is outrageously good. And I think part of it, too, was, okay, I need to hit breaking balls better, which I get. And that was a big part of it for him was, let me recognize breaking balls, let me be able to still hit breaking balls hard. But I think this year, of course, he's still trying to improve in that regard. But it was also, I crush heaters. Let me get back to just demolishing heaters as well as anybody in the minor leagues. I'll crush hangers. And if I get beat by good breaking balls here and there, I'll get beat by good breaking balls here and there. He's a 1,400 OPS against four-seamers and sinkers this year. You can make a living off of crushing four-seamers and hanging breaking balls, and that'll work. And as you get more reps in, you'll hit breaking balls better and better. But the reality is, at the big league level, like you can be as primed up as possible to hit breaking balls, and if it's a good pitch and it's well executed and well located, you're just going to have to tip your cap a lot of the time. So it's been nice to see Lazaro hedge those weaknesses, and he took a big step in doing that last year. But I think now he's gotten comfortable enough to where he's leaning back into the strengths again, and I'm going to ambush heaters. But I'm also okay getting deep into counts and trying to survive there too. But I think it was a little passive at points last year, and now he's getting that A swing off, and we're seeing the contact quality make a huge leap this year. And I'm excited to see if he's able to keep doing that in Double-A, where the stuff is going to be a little bit better. And so far, he has. I mean, he's been awesome in the early going in Double-A.
Last one I've got for you is, for all the time we spend talking about this year's draft, I'm curious where your evaluation is now, a year into the guys the Mariners took in last year's draft, in the two big arms in Jurangelo Cijntje and Ryan Sloan, because both guys have some serious helium. So from your perspective, what's jumped out to you about those two?
And also, I just thought of a name real quick that I think is going to, hopefully if he's healthy, Teddy McGraw. I watched, so it's funny, I was actually watching, I'm trying to remember which hitter I was watching tape on, but he got soul snatched. I'm pretty sure it was Charlie Condon. I got soul snatched by Teddy McGraw, and then that just led me to go back to watching more Teddy McGraw again. And I know last time out he wasn't great, but finally healthy. As long as he's healthy, that stuff's going to play. I don't care if it's as a reliever or however they want to use him. The stuff is just too darn good. So that's a guy that I think could really burst onto the scene if he gets the opportunity to stay healthy. But to answer your question, I mean, I think you've got to be thrilled with the results so far, especially with Ryan Sloan. Sloan was a guy that after I watched a couple starts this year, he pitched his way onto our top 100 list because it's what you can dream on, right? He's 6'5", 220, 19 years old, and already is filling up the strike zone at a ridiculous clip for a prep righty. You know, we're just talking about the volatility of prep righties and things like that. You wouldn't know it with Ryan Sloan the way that he's looked. 5% walk rate. The fastball is averaging 95. Now, the characteristics could be a little bit better, and that's something that he can improve over time. But that sweeper is disgusting. Like, that is a plus pitch already. And then he's flashing this splitter that I'd like to see him throw a little bit more, and he's started to, I think, include it a bit more. It's about 10% of the time now. And that pitch has looked really good as well. So that looks like that can be an above-average offering. He's mixed in a cutter also. You have the potential for a quality four-pitch mix here from a 6'5" righty who throws strikes at a plus clip right now. That guy could be a monster. And then Jurangelo Cijntje, it's funny because it feels like he's almost a little bit more of a project than Ryan Sloan, which isn't the worst thing in the world because he hasn't been pitching that long, right? He's been throwing with both arms, but he was also a switch-hitting position player in the early going of his collegiate career as well. We've talked about it before we hit record. I think the left-handed throwing thing is fun. I think it's entertaining, but I think it's also just taking away from his development as a righty at this point, and I think it's somewhat more of just an entertainment factor. I'd love to see him just lean into the right arm and see where that goes because that's a potential 70-grade heater there. And then we've seen the ability to spin the baseball. He just doesn't have the confidence quite yet, I think, to do it as consistently. But you're seeing the stuff there. And so I think between Sloan and Cijntje, you've got to be really excited so far. The results will come with Cijntje, I think, especially as he just focuses on the right arm. But I think the fact that Sloan was the other pick and he's looked as good as he's looked, you've got two exciting arms on the way.
Last thing for me, Aram, we've seen Harry Ford this year tap into about as much power as we've ever seen him do as a pro in AAA. How much of that is him hitting in the PCL, and how much of that is Harry Ford taking that next step forward as a hitter?
It's funny. I would actually say more taking the step forward, and it's so tough when you have that environment out there. But if he was still hitting the same way he was last year, I would say, ooh, okay, this might just be the change of environment. And I say that because in the past, he very much was, okay, I'm not going to hit balls 110 consistently, so I need to pull the ball in the air, and I need to have some loft in my swing. And that created some miss at the top. He would swing and miss on four-seamers at the top a bunch. But he had a 37% ground ball rate last year because he was trying to elevate. But he still only hit 7 home runs anyways. So I felt like that swing was geared for lift, but not even really in the right way, and it was resulting in some whiff at the top of the zone. This year he made some adjustments to be, I think, a little bit flatter through the zone, which can be okay to a certain point. I think it can actually be helpful, especially when you're a shorter lever guy like Ford. And you're seeing the power shine through anyways because it's actually hitting the ball harder. The EVs are up this year. The contact rates are up. And he's covering four-seamers at the top better than he ever has. So I think it really was a matter of, okay, you don't need to sell out for loft to try to slug more than your frame would imply. Just get your best swing off as consistently as possible, and you're going to end up hitting home runs on accident. And I think that's what we're seeing. He's pulling line drives that are leaving the yard here. But now you're seeing him use the whole field more effectively. You're seeing him just get to the top more and cover all different pitch types more effectively. And I think you're just seeing a much more well-rounded hitter, which you make more consistent contact and it's a little bit harder, you're going to hit more home runs anyways. So I think that's what he's leaned into here. And regardless of environment, it's been a tangible improvement from him.
It's good stuff. Aram, as always, you do this as well as anybody, and we don't just say that because you're a friend of ours, but your stuff is awesome for anybody who doesn't already know, which you should if you don't already to this point, but we'll give it a plug. Again, go listen to the call-up, go listen to the Just Baseball show, go check out justbaseball.com. Aram and the whole staff over with our friends at Just Baseball are doing awesome stuff. So thanks for hopping on, Aram. Thanks for hopping on, Aram. There we go. And can't wait to see you in Atlanta.
I can't wait as well. Thank you guys for having me. Of course, you guys are doing as good of a job as anybody covering the Mariners. And we were just talking about it. I'm rooting so hard for a Mariners playoff appearance or little run for you guys because it's just been so fun to watch. Literally, you guys keep me up to date with the Mariners as well as anybody. So I feel like I'm tapped in on the team by just following your guys' socials and tuning in every time. So I always appreciate you guys having me on. And hopefully we'll be talking about some deadline moves.
Shout out Aram. Always love having a conversation with him. His analysis we really think is excellent. Hopefully you guys learned some things. Hopefully you guys are as prepared for the draft now as you could possibly be. Well, except for one more preview that TJ and I still have to do on Friday. But hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Again, draft is now just 5 days away from the time you're listening to this. 4, 5, give or take. And we can't wait. So shout out Aram. That just about wraps up this edition of the Marine Layer Podcast. You guys know the drill. If you want to listen to all of our stuff, you can listen on YouTube. You can watch on the audio side. You can watch on YouTube, listen on the audio side. If you're on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and please hit that subscribe button. Subscribing to YouTube really does help the two of us, helps the brand, helps the channel. If you're watching and also decide to listen on the audio side, you can download, you can rate and review, leave it 5 stars. Everything you need to stay on top of all of our stuff is over at our websites, episodes included. That's marinelayerpod.com. And over there, get your merch, you guys. Summer's here. There's t-shirts. There's hats. We're going to unveil some more stuff in the coming weeks. You can go get your merch over there. You can sign up for our Patreon. Check out our live show schedule. That's all over at marinelayerpod.com. And follow us all across social media, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube Shorts, at Marine Layer Pod. That's TJ. I'm Lyle. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.